Howdy everyone. Well, it's been a while since I've made a video, basically because I've been doing other things. I have been out here in the shop from time to time working on wings and wing tips, but nothing exciting. It's just more of the same, so I didn't want to make a video basically rehashing, more vinyl and things of that nature. So this video may be a little bit more useful. It might be a little bit more entertaining. So the left wing is back in the stand and it is finished for now. I've got some vinyl on it. The wingtip has been fitted. And like I said, I wanted to do that whole wingtip fitting process first before I made any real detailed video covering that process. So this video is the first video in that series as far as the installation of the wingtips in a little bit more detail. So this is the right wing back on the bench. You're looking at the bottom side, and I'm just now going to start fitting the wingtip to this wing. So over here I've got the zip tip. I believe this is the Zip Tip 3. I think some people call it the Zip Tip Premier. It's also known as a winglet, a zip tip winglet, whatever you want to call it. This is the wingtip that I'm using. And this wingtip has had absolutely nothing done to it. This is how the wingtip comes out of the box. So a couple of things I want to point out. First thing is that the lights on the zip tips are all inclusive. So this is the taxi light, landing light, nav light, strobe, everything is in here. This whole package inside here is attached to this fiberglass work in here. This fiberglass is attached to the wingtip with this back flange here all the way around and up here. That's it. This flange is not attached to the wing. And this in here is also not attached. It's only glued, if you will, to the wingtip, like I said, along this back flange all the way around. You'll see that there's a step right here. There's a step here. And there's a gap all the way around this perimeter, and then there's another step right here, and again this is also loose. And you'll notice that there's a bolt here. This is just a shipping bolt. This bolt just prevents these two pieces from shimming around, jacking around and stuff. So I need to take this bolt out, get rid of it, and then I need to cut these flanges back. So you can see that this flange, this is close to 3/4 of an inch deep. The wingtip, or the wing itself, the wing skin here, this flange is maybe a 1/2 inch, 5/8, something like that. So when you put the wingtip in here, there's going to be a gap between this edge and the edge of the wingtip. So if I were able to put the wingtip on right now, the skin of the wing, since this is a lot wider, the skin of the wing would stop short of this edge. The aluminum on the wing would come across and it would stop. So in order to close this gap between the wing and the wingtip, this edge here needs to be cut back. So this flange needs to basically be slightly undersized from the flange that's on the wing itself. I hope that makes sense. So this whole flange all the way around top and bottom has to be cut back. When you do that, you also need to cut back this flange that's part of this. The one I was just showing you that's separate from the rest of the wingtip. This one also needs to be cut back. So that's the first thing I need to do. So I'm going to pull this bolt out. I'm going to do some measurements. I'm going to mark my lines. I'm going to take this whole thing outside and use a Dremel to cut this flange back. The other thing that I had to do on the other wingtip, and it looks like I'll have to do it on this one as well, you'll see that there's a seam here. This seam where the flange is located is a little bit of an interference. It sticks out a little bit. You just have to sand that smooth. Because what will happen is when you take this wingtip and you try to fit it to the wing and the leading edge here, if that seam is sticking out, you won't be able to get the wingtip in here to close the gaps that are in here. So I need to cut that flange back, and I need to make sure that that leading edge seam is sanded nice and smooth so I can get it to fit up in here. The other thing that you'll notice is there is no filler back here on the trailing edge of the zip tip. Now, my original wings, the original van's wings, comes with an aluminum rib to fit in here. I sold those wingtips, and I sold those aluminum ribs with those tips. So I don't know if the original van's wingtip ribs will fit in here. I'm not sure. But on my other wing, I just made my own rib out of foam, like I had done on some of the other empennage pieces, and we'll get to that. But just make note that if you have the filler ribs from the original van's wingtips, they may or may not work on these. You may or may not have to make your own, but we'll get there. So for now, like I said, I'm going to measure out these flanges, and I'm going to cut those back. I'm going to make sure that this flange here on this inner piece, these are also cut back, and I'm going to smooth out the seam on this front leading edge here. At that point, when I get everything cut and cleaned up, I can take this and start actually fitting it onto the wing, and at that point we can start making holes, marking hole locations, and possibly do some drilling. All right, so let me get this trimmed, and I'll talk to you guys here in a second. All right, so it's probably going to be a little difficult to tell, but I have trimmed off roughly 1/4 of an inch from this flange. You can see the notch here where I had made the cut. This had run all the way across even, but now it's notched a little bit here, about 1/4 of an inch. And I just cut this flange all the way around the top, of course around the front and down along the bottom. And while I did that, of course, I went ahead and cut, get a better shot here, this inside flange as well. Like I said, this piece and the outside actual wingtip are not joined in this area. They're only joined back in here. So there's movement between these two pieces. And that will make sense a little bit later on. So I got this cut. I did some preliminary sanding on this edge here. There's a little bit of a rib, I don't want to say a rib, a seam through here that was a little high. I sanded that down, not too much. You can still feel it just because I don't want to take it down to the point where it wears through, but it is a lot better. I also took a little bit off of this seam here. Again, not too much. You can still feel it a little bit, but I didn't want to sand it so much to wear through and then have a crack or a gap and have to come back and fill it and screw around. So I'm just going to leave it like it is. So now I have to put the aileron actually on the wing, because this trailing edge, not a trailing edge, but this part on the aft side of the wingtip, this is the trailing edge of the wingtip here. This area here that has not been touched is where the aileron lives. So when I start fitting the wing tip to the wing itself, I also need to fit this back part here to the aileron. So I got to get the aileron back installed to the wing itself. Now you may remember, or you may not, when I had built the wings, the aileron and the flap were put on after the wing was built, and the aileron and the flap was built, and I had to rig everything to each other. So the flap, the aileron, and the wing were all rigged together. I got the linkage all set up. Everything was installed onto the fuselage. It was all out in the garage, and everything was put into alignment, rigged, jigged, straight. The throws, positive and negative, were all checked and tweaked. So this has been completely finished. So what I had done then was I had taken notes on my washers and spacers and nuts and bolts, and I had wrote that down for each individual aileron and each individual flap. So you can see kind of my cheat sheets here. So one of these is for this location, and one of these is for the other location. And I've got the same thing on the other side. It tells me exactly where to put the fat washers, the thin washers, the shims, the spacers, whatever. So this will go back onto the wing exactly the way it was when I did all my rigging. So I have to do that next. I got to take this aileron. I'm going to put it on the wing. I'm going to put it back exactly the way it was when it was rigged correctly and I was happy with it. And after it's in place, it's going to stick out here somewhere. When I put the wingtip on, I'm going to have to trim that back area of the wingtip so that I can at least get it in here fitted and start marking holes. So that's going to be the next step, I believe. I'll get on that, and I'll see you guys here in a little bit.